Hello and welcome to the Children's Ministry Web Summit brought to you by Pajama Conference and David C. Cook. Super excited to be here with you today. My name is Melissa McDonald, and just a little bit about me because you may be wondering, who is this person? First of all, we're going to be talking about getting and keeping great volunteers, which I'm sure those of you that have tuned into this are tuning in because you're wondering, how do I get these volunteers, and then how do I keep them? Because that is such a difficult thing in our day and age. So we'll talk about that. But just a little bit about me. My name is Melissa McDonald, and I have worked with kids for a lot of years. I graduated from Crown College in Minnesota, and I went on from there and was a children's pastor for about 6 years in both Florida and Idaho. Kind of a bit of a transition to go from Orlando, Florida to the western state of Idaho. I had a little bit of culture shock. And then from Idaho, I actually went to Vienna, Austria, where I was the elementary chaplain and counselor at Vienna Christian School, which is now known as the International Christian School of Vienna. And then after that, I have been doing things like this. And right now I am the National Children's Ministry Consultant for the Christian and Missionary Alliance denomination, and I also do independent consulting in children's ministries. So I do a lot of traveling around and working with churches, working with people who are trying to figure out what this whole kids ministry thing is about, and training them and equipping them. And I, in a lot of ways, feel like a pastor to children's pastors and to those that are working with kids ministry. You guys are so important, and I think it's important too that you have someone that's pouring into you. I loved being a children's pastor, and I was really a good children's pastor. Knew what I was doing and could really grow programs and equip and train, and I really felt like God was calling me to step out and do that at a wider level. So I do that. You can find out more about me by going to my website. It's melissajmcdonald.com. Not related to Ronald, although I do have an uncle named Ronald. And if you work with kids at all, you know that's hysterical to kids, so I'm very popular for that. So I do a bunch of things. I'll be speaking at a bunch of camps this summer and contributed to a book and all sorts of things, but anything Kidmin related. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that's everything except cranky volunteers and stale goldfish. So, as we talk about volunteers, why don't we go ahead and get started? You should have a printout that you can grab for notes. I challenge you and ask that you do grab that. I think you'll find it really helpful. I don't know about you, but I actually really like having my notes to look back at later. And especially on a time like today where you are taking in a lot of information, it's going to be really helpful for you to, take a week or two and look back. So go ahead and grab those. Alrighty, well, getting and keeping great volunteers. If we were in a big group, I would ask you, what are some of your biggest challenges about getting volunteers? And probably a lot of those would be people, finding the people. And then you could say, well, actually getting them, which is, they all have excuses, right? We've heard them all. I'm too busy. From older people we hear, I did my time. I'm old. I want a break. From the younger generation, we hear, I'm so busy. I have my own kids. And we hear excuse after excuse after excuse. And the thing is, they're valid. They're really valid. I've been to churches where they make it mandatory. If you're in the nursery and if you have a child in the nursery, you automatically serve in the nursery. Personally, not something I agree with. Not everyone is equipped well to work with kids, and not everyone has that passion. And just because they have kids doesn't mean that kids are their area. So I really don't recommend doing that. But I think some of those challenges that we have when it comes to recruiting volunteers is also just the actual doing it. It can be exhausting, it can be challenging, and it can be really discouraging because we've all been told no, probably countless times, right? And so we've been told no, and we've been told that it's not going to work, and who wants to try again, right? So there's a lot of challenges out there. But we're going to talk about getting them first, and then we'll go into keeping them. And I have noticed that a lot of seminars that talk about volunteers do really good on recruiting and getting them, but there's none of that actual keeping them. And that's a part that I really do want to focus on, because it's one thing to get them, it's another thing to keep them. So we're going to focus on that as well. I think that's really important. So really, let's talk about getting them. I would say that the number one thing you can do is pray. And usually that's the last thing we do. And I know for me, I can lay in bed at night and panic about my volunteers because I don't have this person and I don't have this person. And right now I'm thinking, because I work part-time at a local church where I live, and I do consulting and kids ministry with them, and I can think right now, I'm actually sitting in the church and I can think of the holes that I have. And right before I came in, the secretary is like, how do I get more nursery volunteers? So I'm living this. I want you to know that I'm living in this, the tension of volunteers and getting them. But usually the last thing that I remember to do is pray. And that's really the first thing that we need to be doing. Because whether you're a control freak like me or not, we're not in control. And really, this is God's ministry. And so if God is truly blessing our ministries, He's going to provide the volunteers. And the first place that we need to go is to Him. And we need to pray. So I really encourage you to do that. And you might even need to take a minute and do that right now and just pray about it, because God always comes through. I learned early on, after hours of not sleeping and months of worrying, that God's got it in control. And me, by worrying, I don't add a single day to my life. Nothing happens. I just make myself miserable. So praying about it. It's often, like I said, and that's one of your blanks too, it's the best thing you can do. It's often the last thing that we remember to do. Absolute last thing that we remember to do. There's some ways that I would suggest praying for your volunteers. This isn't just praying, like, dear God, help me. And that's okay, because I've had those moments. But being really intentional. I would suggest creating a prayer list. Writing down, here are my holes. Here's where I need someone. I know right now I need some nursery volunteers, and I have a preschool teacher that wants to get out of preschool. Okay, that's my list. I would create that list. I would also encourage you, it's such a great idea to get some of those older people in your community, your church community, who you know are prayer warriors, and give them the list. At one of my churches I was at, I had a lovely older lady who at the beginning of every fall, summer, she would come to me and say, I need your list of volunteers. I want to pray for them. She prayed faithfully by name for my volunteers for the whole year. And she also prayed faithfully for the holes that I had. And I really think that made a big difference. That's also a great way to get volunteers for children's ministry, because whether they're working with kids or not, some of my old saints are the best volunteers by praying. So I would encourage you to do that. Pray through your directory. If you have a church directory or you have a church database, pray through it. It's one thing, with the Bible, we can open it and go, okay, that's the inspiration I need today. I don't necessarily recommend doing that with your directory or with your database, because we all know that there are some loose cannons in our church community, because that's what the church is about. We're here for messy, we're here for broken. Not everyone is going to fit well in children's ministry, which you probably know. But I would really encourage you to go through that directory. One of the churches I work with has a picture directory. Well, it's great for me to go through and think about that person and pray through it. And I would encourage you to do that. I would pray before you go through it and just, God, direct me in the right place. I think the big thing too with getting volunteers is understanding that really it is God's responsibility, and you need to come under that authority. Take a deep breath and let Him really work through you. That's going to be really important. Pray through your rooms. Whether you meet in a school, whether you meet in somebody's house, or you have your own nice, awesome church, you need to pray through your rooms. Walk through them. I would suggest doing this on a weekly basis. Make that just part of your routine on a Tuesday morning when you come into work. You're going to spend 20 minutes, walk through each room, pray for the kids, but also just pray for the volunteers that are working in there and the ones that you need. Again, it's positioning your heart for what God wants to do. And when it comes to volunteers, we often think, oh, it's task, I'm going to do this, this, and that. It's really more, it has a lot more to do with our hearts, I think, than it does with just in our tasks. So pray through your rooms, and pray on Sunday mornings. Be willing to just let the congregation know, not that we're desperate and we need volunteers, but just let them know what God's doing in kids ministry and ask them to pray. You'll be amazed. People will pray. You'll be amazed at how, as they pray, it changes their attitude, it changes their mindset, and they often can become one of your best volunteers as well. So we're going to look at a couple verses really quick. And when I teach the seminar and I'm with people, and I am with you, I know that, but when I have people in the room, then we would go through and read. So we'll just look really quick. Matthew 9, 37 through 38. Really that talks about the Lord of the harvest. And this does talk about recruiting. And what does it talk about? When we're talking about the Lord of the harvest, to me, when I hear that, and I would encourage you to read the scripture and really look at it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because I think that's something that is really great to do kind of personally. But for me, a huge takeaway from that verse is I'm not the Lord of the harvest, which I have to say is a little startling because I have lived a lot of my life thinking I was in charge of things, thinking I was the end-all of everything. But I'm not the Lord of the harvest. This is kind of what I've been talking about already. It's not my job. It is God's job. And we need to ask God, and we need to trust Him. It's one thing to ask. It's a whole other ball game to trust Him to provide the answers that we're asking for. And He's in charge. I've said it before, I'll say it again. He's in charge. We're not. This is His ministry. And if you can't get that, if you don't really grasp that, you need to step away and you need to really think through that. And if you're still not getting that, you might need to just step out for a while. Because if you're in children's ministry because you're in charge and because you need something, you're in it for the wrong reason. So you may need to step out. He's in charge. We're not. Trust Him. Ephesians 4, 11 through 12, I'll let you read that on your own. But I really love this verse because these verses, it talks about part of the body and the people that are in that, but really they're gifts to us. And I don't think we often see that. We just see holes that need to be filled, or we just see screaming kids that need someone to watch them, or whatever it is, but they're gifts to us. And I think we often think that we're gifts to them, but they're gifts to us. And the other thing I love about that is God makes it pretty clear that they're out there. Like the body is the body. Whether it is 25 people or it's a church of thousands, the body is there and they're out there. We need to pray for them. We need to find them and plug them in. So I would encourage you to spend time when you get the chance. If you go away for a few hours in the middle of the week every now and then, kind of focus on those verses, because again, it's about positioning your heart for what God wants to do in and through you as you recruit. All right, getting them. If it's God's ministry, it's way, way, way too important to be desperate about it. And I kind of touched on that earlier, but this is a really difficult thing. But if it truly is His ministry, it's too important to be desperate, okay? And it's too important to recruit just to fill holes. It's God's ministry. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to keep saying it. It's too important to be desperate about it. So take that. Let it resonate within you. Write it on a piece of paper. Put it on your laptop. Put it up on your wall in your office. If it's God's ministry, it's too important to be desperate about it. And I actually heard that from Gordon West, who's the co-founder of Kids at Heart International and has an awesome ministry. And I heard him speak and he said that, and I thought, that is awesome, and that's something I need to hear. So I often look at that phrase again and go, oh, that's right. All right. Now there's some myths out there, and this is kind of where I get a little fired up about stuff, because I think we approach recruiting from kind of a backwards way. I talk to people all the time. I've worked with people who get so frustrated because they say that my church just doesn't care about kids ministry. They just don't care. You know, they just have no heart for what God's doing in kids ministry. That irritates me to death. And you can see I'm getting irritated. It irritates me because of this. It is not their responsibility as they sit in the congregation, as they come in for 1 hour a week, and they come in and they want to spend time with God, or whatever reason they're at church. It's not their responsibility to suddenly develop a passion for kids ministry. It's our responsibility. And if we're saying, oh, our church doesn't care, that is your fault. That is your problem. And I know that sounds harsh, but I truly believe that. And I've worked with people. I worked with a youth pastor who, oh, my church just doesn't care about youth ministry. Well, I can tell you why. So you've got to help instill a passion in them. You are going to have those jewels that walk in and love kids and get it. But, 80% of our volunteers are not going to get it. Our job is to instill into them this passion for kids ministry. If you're passionate about what you're doing, tell people, talk about it. So that's my myth, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we do with that. So if it's not our job, or if it's not their job to develop a passion for children's ministry, and it's our job, how do we do that? Okay? I may have offended some of you already. You might be logging off. I don't know. But stick with me, because I have a madness, or a method to my madness here. I do have a madness. Okay, you need to create a buzz. And I just like the word buzz because it's got Z's and you get to Z. But you need to create a buzz. Children's ministry is one of the most effective ministries for reaching lost families. It's also the most fun. We need to portray our vision and our excitement and invite people to join in. Now, I know that there are some of you out there who are like, children's ministry is the best ministry in the world. I totally agree with you. But there are people out there who do not agree with us. However, we all know that really children's ministry is the most fun ministry to be a part of. And it's also, I would say, the most difficult ministry to be in charge of, because it is a lot of people managing. And you do not get into children's ministry because you want to hang out with kids. You get into children's ministry, you have to realize, to change lives. And that's going to be a lot of dealing with adults. I met a lady years ago who blew me away because I said, she goes, well, what do you, we were at a ministry conference. She's like, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm involved in children's ministry. I'm a children's pastor, and I just really enjoy it because I really think there's an opportunity for life change there and a whole legacy. And she's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, so what do you do? And she's, well, I'm involved in children's ministry too, because I was like, I just really like to color. And so I thought I would do kids ministry. And I was like, what? I was floored and I was appalled by that. But she was honest. She was also wrong. And I think she learned. I didn't keep up with her because she irritated me. But I think she learned that it is not about coloring to doing children's ministry. There's a lot more. So if children's ministry is I truly believe it's one of the most effective ministries in the church for reaching lost families. Because let's look at our world today. It's very, very kid-centered. You guys know people who run like mad to take their kids to soccer game, to cheer practice, to dance, to wrestling. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And you watch them zing, 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 back and forth and go crazy doing all of this. And what's it for? It's for the kids. Moms and dads want their kids to have a future. They want them to have lots of opportunities. They want them to have what they never had. They want them to have everything. Very kid-centered, which is not the church of yesterday. And I'm not saying I agree with that at all, but I do agree that it's a great, wide open opportunity for us to reach lost families. Because if parents want their kids to be happy and to enjoy what they're doing, and they find a church that has a vital children's ministry where their kids feel safe and their kids feel loved and their kids are learning and having fun, mom and dad are going to start coming to church. Mom and dad are going to start hearing about God. I've seen whole families changed based on that premise alone. I wanted my kid to be happy. Okay, well, not really kind of a philosophy that I technically agree with, but God works in mysterious ways, and thank the Lord that his ways are not my ways, because whole lives have been changed because of a kid wanting wanting just to be happy and wanting to have fun. So that's a huge thing too. We need to portray our vision and our excitement and invite people to join in. Children's ministry is awesome. It is so exciting. So much can happen. There's so much going on. If you talk to someone about that, they are going to get on board. They're going to be like, oh, something's happening. So let's talk about the creating a buzz. Okay, so I'm going to talk about it. List as many creative ways as possible. Do some thinking on your own, or if you're with a team, that's awesome. But ways that you can let people see your ministry in a positive way. And this is huge. Again, this goes back to, it's not our congregation's responsibility to get a passion for children's ministry. It's our responsibility to show them what God's doing. We can't show them what God's doing by not showing kids in church, in big church, by letting them see what God's doing. So let's talk about that. What are some ways? You could have on a Sunday morning, you could have a teacher share about what God's doing in their life through working through kids ministry. That's awesome. Probably 2 months ago, I had a couple, they teach what do they teach? Kindergarten, first and second grade, little group that we have. And I videoed them. They are not super outgoing people, and they're not people that would do really well up front. They were good on video. So I videoed them. We talked about, why are you doing kids ministry? Kent, who's a hunter and a farmer, blue collar where I live right now. Kent, what keeps you out of the field on a Sunday morning and coming to work with these little guys? He talked about how his life's changing, how he just sees the potential, how he loves it. Marty, his wife, talked about what God's doing in her heart, and not just with the kids, but how then she gets to have a relationship with the adults and the parents in these kids' lives. Blew it out of the water. I mean, the church was sitting there like, oh, they're crying, which is great. If you can get them to cry because of what God's doing, you're doing well. Excuse me. Totally blew it out of the water. They were so excited, and it was a great way to show, to really create that buzz and show what God's doing. So have a teacher share. And if you're in a big church, I know you're crunched for time. I've worked in these big churches where just plan down to the last minute. Fight for it. Fight for your time. You can have a teacher share in other mediums too. Put it on your website. Do a 30-second video, put it on your website. Facebook page. Have a church Facebook page. Put a teacher on there sharing. Create a buzz. Talk about what God's doing. This works. And people will get excited. When people start to go, something's happening in the kidmin world over there, they're going to want to be a part of what God's doing. And people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And when we show them what's going on, and they know that they have an opportunity, they are going to want to get involved with that. Have a kid share. Have a kid talk about what God's doing in their life. Have a kid talk about a cool story that you heard them tell about what happened at school or something, how they're living their life out, their faith out in real life. Again, you can video it. You can put it on Facebook. You can send it out on email. Or if you're in a church where you've got a pastor who's on board with kids ministry and is willing to let you take some time, which is what we all hope for, have that kid share in church. You know the kids that can and cannot handle that. And you know the ones that if you give a mic, they're never getting off. They're like our future orators and preachers and presidents and all that. So have a kid share. Post up-to-date artwork. Now, I used to be of the camp, I just don't like outdated things. I didn't like flannel graph puppets, blah, blah, blah. I'm not in that camp anymore. I'm in the camp that if it's engaging kids, go for it. And I used to hate this idea of posting kids' artwork, like, oh, brother, how boring. It's so cool. But it needs to be up to date. If it's Easter and there's still turkeys hanging on the wall, that's annoying. And that shows that we don't care enough about what's happening to keep it updated. And you might not think, and I know, and you know, and all that we know, that that's not what we're thinking. It means we're busy, or we forgot to ask someone to do it, or whatever. But what is it portraying? It's portraying that we don't have enough time. It's portraying that we're not up to date. It's portraying that we don't know what's going on. So it needs to be up-to-date artwork. If you have, we have a long Sunday school hall, and I want to put up like just the little bulletin boards outside each door, and just post things once a month or whatever. Here's what's happening in this classroom. Here's what's happening in this small group. And letting people know as they walk down the hall. If you have a secure hallway where parents aren't allowed down, great. What is that like? That must be great. I want one. Then you need to have a children's bulletin board somewhere else, children's ministry bulletin board, or you need to have an area where you can talk about what God's doing in kids ministry. Totally recommend that. Invite leaders to visit. So again, if we say, oh man, nobody has a passion for kids and nobody has a passion, and I don't really think the church leadership even cares about what I'm doing, and I work and I slave, and it's all true. We know that. But if we're not showing them what's happening, then it's our bad. It's our problem. So invite the elders to come visit. I recently just killed our Wednesday night program with the hope and desire to relaunch it bigger and better. Because sometimes you just have to kill programs that aren't working well so that you can do things better. And that's a whole nother seminar. And anyways, but we did that. And I thought, what are we going to do in the meantime? We are going to relaunch, and what are we going to do in the meantime? We've got kids, we have a responsibility, and all of that. And we decided to do a once a month thing for the kids. Amazing. So we did a once a month Wednesday night thing, big, just fun event. And the greatest thing was, it was a huge opportunity for us to get volunteers who can't volunteer for every week thing, but who can volunteer for a once a month thing. So I had these people coming in. I had elders, some of my church elders in working with these kids. I had some of our key leaders in church serving cookies to my kids. Huge, okay? And they start to go, I didn't know. I had one of our head elders who brought his grandkids to the event, and they don't attend our church regularly. The kids don't. But he came to me last week and said, Mel, my grandkids have never talked about Jesus as much as they have after that event. And that event was one where I was like, really? Are you sure they were at my event? Because I didn't think it went well. But it made an impact on these kids, which made an impact on this elder, which is going to trickle down through the church. I totally believe that. All because I invited leaders to visit. I invited people to get involved. Do it. Take a risk. Take a risk. Step out. Ask them to come. Don't set it up as like a tour of homes. Like, here's a tour. No, ask them like, hey, could you come and talk for 5 minutes? We're learning about generosity this month. Could you come and talk about how you've been generous? Do it. It'll blow you away. Just try it. Okay, a prayer tree. This is probably best for a more smaller church, maybe 300 or less. But you could put a tree or whatever in your foyer with classroom names or small group leaders. You could, if you're in a small church where you feel comfortable, you could do each child's name. I don't recommend that necessarily, and maybe that's just my linear mind that has a hard time with that, because I'm like, well, what if a new kid comes and nobody's praying for them? But do that. Encourage people. Hey, can you grab a name? Can you start praying for them? Do that. Very cool. And that also, as people see, whether you put a piece of paper or whatever you put on that tree, they go, oh, I didn't know we had that much going on in kids ministry. I didn't know we had that many kids, that many teachers, volunteers. Again, if you're in a smaller church or even a larger church, have the kids usher. These are some ideas that I've gotten from people all over as I've gone around and I've taught seminars and worked with churches and people. Have kids help usher. Somebody, and I can't remember where, so if this was you, and I'm not giving you credit, I apologize, but someone said, take balloons into the worship service one day, one for every kid involved in your children's ministry. Wow, that can make an impact. That can make a huge impact. I was at a church of about 450 to 500, and I worked with 150 kids on a weekly basis. Church didn't know that necessarily. If I would have taken in 150 balloons into that service, it would have blown them away. Again, we're creating the buzz. This isn't just about doing stuff for the sake of doing it. It's really about creating a buzz. Like, things are happening in children's ministry. We're reaching kids. We're doing cool stuff. Excuse me. If you do a newsletter, put a story in the newsletter. Take a minute and talk about what God's doing. My mind is right now thinking, okay, we're a little low on nursery volunteers. I need to start talking about how early development happens and concept of God happens before the age of 5, what a great opportunity is to work in the nursery. I'm not just going to get in there and go, oh gosh, nobody to watch the 12 screaming children. I'm going to approach it from, you're changing lives. So put something in the newsletter, do a video, we've talked about that. On your website, church websites are notorious for being terrible, super outdated, and hard to navigate. Get a website that works and keep it updated. Include what God's doing in children's ministry. Whether it's just I used to do, here's what, heard in the halls, I called it. Here's a funny little one-liner I heard from a kid. Here's this, and people love that. Again, you're just promoting, you're showing what's happening in kids' ministry. It doesn't always have to be biblical in Jesus. Just talk about what God's doing. Just talk about what you're hearing. Kids are hysterical. Talk about that. Other things, if you do a weekly bulletin, put this week, have a children's ministry corner. This week in children's ministry, here's what we're learning. Great. 90% may not read it, but that 10% that looks at it might go, oh, cool stuff happening in our children's ministry. We're just creating a buzz. T-shirts. If you're in a church where you've got funds, or even if you don't, and this is something you want to put money into, I would suggest it. Have your volunteers wear a t-shirt where you match. And if you have time and the ability, create a brand, a theme, an identity. If that's something you're interested in, you could contact me personally. I've got a couple of awesome contacts that are gifted at creating children's ministries identities. That creates a whole new realm of fun and identity, and it creates that buzz. So, so those are, excuse me, little ways that you can create a buzz. Take some time out. If you're with a group, take some time after this, or at some point when you're debriefing from 50 of the seminars, but to really talk through what are some ways we can create a buzz. The thing is, too, it's going to be different for each place. So it's going to be different for you than it is for me. I'm ministering right now where part-time in a small town. I can create a buzz pretty easily in our town, pretty easily in our church, because I kind of blow them out of the water. Like, whoa, we had no idea. It's more of a challenge when I worked in Orlando, Florida, where you're competing with Disney World and Mickey Mouse. You have to get creative, but don't get so caught up in that you don't forget little things like, we could put a tree out and have people grab stuff and pray, or, we could actually keep artwork up to date. We could have kids talk about, God loves me and this I know and here's why, and stuff like that. So you can think big and think outside the box, but you can also go back to the box and think through that. How can I tweak that a little? So also, excuse me, when you're creating this buzz and as you're getting volunteers, you need to invite them to the vision. And this is my favorite thing to talk about. And this is the thing that I think people forget when they're doing children's ministry recruiting. I'm guilty of this at times as well. You need to invite them to the vision. What is going on? 2.2 billion kids in the world. 800 million have never heard the name of Jesus. Wow. You tell that to people and they have no idea. And that blows their mind. That starts to get them thinking, what does that mean? How do we reach those kids? 800 million have never heard the name of Jesus? Wow. What do we do about that? You create this, or invite them to this vision, this passion, this thing that is not just here, but bigger. By the age of 5, a child's lifelong view and concept of God has been formed. Most of the time, this is almost irreversible. A little scary. And I like to tell my people, as I do the seminar and as I recruit, let that resonate a little and sink in and feel a little uncomfortable. Because it should. That should make you feel uncomfortable. Because I don't know about you, but I often forget the importance of nursery and pre-K in church. Because I have more fun with my upper elementary kids. I enjoy them. But if a kid is forming what their concept of God is before the age of 5, I better start rethinking how I recruit for nursery. Okay, that's what I'm thinking about right now, today. How do I recruit for nursery? If you If you grab someone in their 70s who says, you know, I just have put my time in, these younger people need to do it, I think I'm done. And you say, you know what, I really appreciate the time you put into that, but did you know that by you simply coming and rocking babies once a month, that you're helping these little babies, the concept of God, form? Did you know that if you help them feel safe, even if it's just for an hour and the rest of their home life is not safe, but if for an hour you hold a baby and you rock them, they're going to start to understand that something's different than home. And they're going to start to go, maybe God is safe. Not right then, but later. And you start to talk. First of all, they'll melt into a puddle. Second of all, they're going to go, oh my word, I had no idea. And the thing is, they think we're just filling holes, and we usually are. But it's all in how we promote it and we talk about it. And honestly, if you believe some of this stuff, which you should, it does change how you recruit. Man, I don't care so much about just having a body in my nursery. I want to have someone who gets that they get to really be Jesus to these little babies, to these 2-year-olds. Blows people out of the water. It will change their idea of what is, oh, I just help out in kids ministry. Oh no, you're changing the next generation. So talk about that. Here's a huge one, and this is probably the premise of why I work with kids ministry and I work with ministers who work with kids. Before the age of 12, kids are deciding what they believe. And then after the age of 12, they start defending what they believe. Huge. Okay? And I'm a really proactive person, and so I really like to get in on the ground floor. And I look at that and I go, why would I work with youth ministry? And I work with youth ministry and I love teenagers. But I go, why wouldn't I work with kids and start helping them decide what they believe? I'm not brainwashing them, but I'm exposing them to a God who loves them. I'm exposing them to truth, absolute truth. I'm exposing them to the Bible. I'm exposing them to thinking methods and all of that. That's why I work with kids. Before the age of 12, they're deciding what they believe, then they start defending it. I want to be a part of that ground level, that cornerstone, that foundation that's being laid in these kids' lives. Because we all know when that flip switches and they start going, well, yeah, no, you're wrong. And they start fighting with you and you're like, oh boy, it's time for you to go to youth ministry. Well, I'm just kidding. But before the age of 12, they're deciding. I want to be a part of helping them decide what they believe. When you talk to people and you're recruiting for this and you help them understand that you get to be a part of the foundation of a kid's life, people go, oh, wow, I had no idea. Huh. There's a movement, and you've heard about it, I'm sure, of this whole idea that we're losing our college students. And we are. You know, they're going to college and they're never returning to church. And people, what's going on? What are we doing wrong? So the movement right now is, let's reach our college students. We're going to focus on, and that's so great. But in my mind, and where my heart is, I go back and I go, wait a minute. I absolutely need to reach these college students. But you know what I need to be doing? Before the age of 12, I need to be raising up a group of believers who knows what they believe, who understands the importance of community, who understands that there's a God who loves them, who understands that there's a God who sees them as perfect, who understands that there's a God who sees them and accepts them for exactly who they are, and who understands that there's a God who will never leave them or forsake them. If I raise up before the age of 12 kids who get that, I guarantee you that youth ministry is going to look different. College ministry is going to look different. Young adults, young marrieds, on and on. I firmly believe that, and that's why I'm involved with children's ministry. Because, and at the risk of sounding too cliche, we really are raising up world changers. And world changers start today. They're not the hope of tomorrow. They're not the church of tomorrow. They're the church of today. They're the hope of today. When you recruit like that with a passion and a vision, you will get people to get on board with that. They will be excited about that. We also know that salvation is huge before the age of 13. And I don't have all the exact statistics, but before the age of 13, huge opportunity build up the body of believers, to have these kids understand what it means to have a relationship with Christ. It's huge. You get people excited about that. They're going to, well, that sounds exciting. So you're inviting them to a vision, and that's what I don't think we do. I think we invite them to a program. I think if we're doing it well, we invite them to a really great program, a really great strategy, a really great room, but we forget to invite them to the vision. This isn't about just having a magnificent summer program. This is about changing the generation of today. Blows people. So exciting. I get excited about it. If I wasn't sitting down, I'd be jumping. I get so excited about this because I firmly believe it. So let's talk about keeping them. Okay, we're getting them. We're inviting them to the vision. The thing is, once you've got them, you need to keep going back to that vision. You need to keep praying for them. You need to keep creating a buzz. And you need to keep reminding them, here's why we do this. Here's why we get up early on a Sunday morning and we come in every week to minister to kids. Not because it's a duty, not because we're going to get an extra crown or a jewel in heaven, but because we're changing lives. And if we go back to that whole idea of reaching lost families, we're not just changing lives, we're changing families. So you need to do that. When you're keeping them, you need to plug people in where they fit, not just where you have holes. And that is what is difficult a lot. And especially if you're detail-oriented, task-oriented, I can be all of those at times. And I can write my list down and go, I got to fill this one. That's the one. You're going to go there. No. You have to get out of that mindset. Again, if it's God's ministry, it's too important to be desperate about it. If it's God's ministry, it's too important for you to just fill holes. Because it is not just about filling these holes. It is about, again, we're positioning our hearts. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. We're positioning our hearts, and we are positioning other people for what God wants to do in us and through them and through us and in them. How exciting. Okay? So when we think about that, we're not just plugging people into holes. We're plugging them in where they fit. Last week, I had a planning meeting for the relaunch of our Wednesday night program. And we're in the meeting, and we're going around, and we're assigning roles, and you're going to fit in here, and you're going to do this, and we get to games or activity time, and my cohort in crime looks at the man sitting next to me and says, I think you should do games. I think you could be really good at this. And within my spirit, I just knew he's not supposed to do games. And so I looked at Jim, and I said, Jim, you're not supposed to do games. I've got something else an idea for you. So I just want you to sit tight. And my cohort was like, okay. So then we go around, and I'm like, holy, what am I going to do? Like, I have no idea what I want him to do or what I feel like God wants him to do. I just know he's not supposed to be in games. Well, by the time we came around to him, God had laid exactly on my heart what he needed to be doing. And I had a minute to speak into Jim and say, Jim, you are gifted in this area. You are a leader by example. I want you to be building up our small group leaders. I want you to be pouring into them. It was one of those, it was a holy moment in my little apartment. And it was like God was sitting right there and speaking into this man's life. The whole rest of the team was nodding and saying, yes, yes, yes. That wasn't a hole that I had to fill. I didn't need a small group person. But that is a hole and a fit in Jim's life that I didn't know ahead of time needed to be filled, but God revealed it. And I guarantee you, Jim is not going to be the same person. I truly believe that was a stepping stone in his life that is going to change how he looks at life from this point on. Because I took a minute and I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to fill a hole. I'm going to put somebody where he fits. And by the end of the night, you could see him start to just kind of process and start to change and go, oh yeah, I'm starting to see this, and that. Because he was first like, no. I was like, what? And I'm like, it's you, and you will discover it. And he is. And I guarantee you it's going to be amazing what God does in his life. This is why I get excited about recruiting. I'll be honest, I have my moments of panic. I have my moments of ugh. But I love recruiting. It is one of my favorite things to do, which I know is crazy for so many people. But I love recruiting because I love plugging people in where they fit. And when you plug someone into a spot that is their sweet spot, we all know we need to be working our sweet spot. Same as for our volunteers. And if we plug them into a sweet spot where they fit and they're growing and where God is stretching them and God is speaking to them, they will never leave children's ministry because God is at work in their life because we put them in where they fit, not just where I had a hole. Okay. Help them find their sweet spot. They may not know it. This Jim had no idea what his sweet spot was. But you know what? Because I have done my homework ahead of time and I've been praying and I've been asking God to work in my life, I've been positioning my heart, I've been asking God to position their hearts, it was so easy for me to be listening to God's voice and knowing, oh, okay, nope, this is where you need to go. You need to be very interruptible and you need to be willing to take a leap of faith and to believe in someone what they might not even believe about themselves. You don't do this fly by the seat of your pants, although I technically did, I know that. But I was ready, and he was specifically one I had been praying about for a number of weeks, months. You do this knowing that you have, first of all, you've heard something from God, and you know that this is going to be a good fit. I have done this and known within my heart it's going to work, and it has not worked. And it's been a bit of a failure. But we've recovered well because I did my homework ahead of time, and then I've been able to plug people in somewhere else. I don't lose volunteers, very rarely, and if I do, I lose them to a different ministry that's a better fit for them because I do my job right. Okay, you need to provide training. This seems so simple and so basic, but it's huge. You need to provide training for them, and you need to let them know what's going on. And it is completely appropriate, because I get asked this all the time, it's completely appropriate for you to ask them to be present at meetings. Because I don't know, can I ask that? Yeah, you can. I know they're not getting paid, but you can ask them to be present at a meeting. So feel free to do that. When you do your meetings, you need to, and your trainings, you need to respect them. This is huge if you want to keep your volunteers. You respect them. And by respecting them, you keep your meetings short. If you say we're going to have an hour meeting and you run over an hour, you have lost respect. And you have shown respect, less than respect to them. And I know we get long-winded, blah, blah. Nope, we're done. And I used to have meetings back in the day where I'd say, we'll be done by American Idol, so you can get home. People came to my meetings because they knew they could get home for American Idol. And I never run long. I might run long on this video, but I'm not going to run long when I'm training my volunteers. Make the meetings worth their time. Do not have a meeting just because, well, we haven't had one in a while. Make it worth their time. Otherwise, they will quit coming. And you don't have a lot of force behind saying you have to be at a meeting. Well, what are you going to do? Fire them? No. So you need to make it worth their time. You need to provide useful tools. You need to provide a time for them to talk, a time for them to pray. Make it an hour meeting and make it worth their time. We might have one every 3 months, but if at the third month I don't have necessarily something for them, I'm not going to have a meeting. Usually I try to make sure I do something good so we can have meetings, but to make it worth their time. And provide food, okay? I know we all have short budgets. I know. But provide food. I like to, and it gives me an excuse to bake. I go home, I bake some cookies for them, we're good to go. I do not go and pull little Vienna fingers off of the shelf. I make cookies for them, and I make something yummy so that it's worth their time. They know you're worth my time as well. It's the little things like that huge. They're going to be like, I like working for her. First of all, her cookies are good. If you're a bad cook, don't make cookies. Find something else. But make it worth their time. Make it worth, make yourself be worthy of respect. They're going to come and they're going to be glad to be there because they know they're going to walk away with something. All right. Mandatory stuff. You need to give them breaks. Period. You're going to have those. It's, I just love it. I love it. I'll keep going. Nope. I'm sorry. You have the summer off. You're going to have 8 weeks off. We just love you. We appreciate you, but you're going to have a break. Mandatory break. I don't care if you're desperate. It's a mandatory break. You make it work because they need a break or you will lose them. They may think that they can do it. They can't, and they'll burn out. They need to have time in big church. This gets trickier if you've only got one service and all that, but you make it work. They need to have time in big church. If they're not filling themselves, it's not going to work. If they're missing time in big church, then something is off with their walk in Jesus. This is a warning sign. If they are so caught up in kids and that's where they find their fulfillment and their love and all of that, and I don't like adults or whatever, warning sign, danger, danger, move them out. Because until they're healthy, they can't properly reach these kids. They can't effectively, to the fullest that God wants them to, reach these kids. So pull them out. Scary, I know. But again, this is not just about filling holes. This is about building up people. And this is about building the community of Christ. And this is about working within people and letting them know we want you to be healthy. We want to pour into you so you can pour into others. Time in big church, huge. Protect them. Safe place procedures risk management procedures need to be in place. I suggest the book Safe Place. It's excellent, very easy to use. There's a CD-ROM, blah, blah, blah. Excellent. But they need to be in place. All right, and I go to a number of churches and I talk about stuff like this and they do not have risk management procedures in place. We don't live in a world where that's okay anymore. I don't care if you live in the mountains and nothing has ever happened bad in your little community. It's just a matter of time. Sad, but true. You need to have risk management procedures in place. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, send me an email, catch me on my blog, tweet me, whatever. And I would love to help you get those in place pretty easily, too. And my huge one that I love is you take care of the hard stuff. Okay? It's your job to have your volunteers have the best time ever. Which means when it gets to the ickiness, when you've got a kid who's banging his head against the wall and wants to kill himself, or you've got a mom who's crying and angry, you say, you know what? I've got this. They come to you for the hard stuff. Huge. If they know they can leave the stress of work week behind them and they can come and serve at church, and they know you've got the hard stuff and the icky stuff, you'll keep your volunteers. Okay, appreciate them. This is huge. And sometimes we think, oh, well, I do. You probably don't as well as you should. I don't as well as I should. I'm behind right now on something as far as appreciating my volunteers. So appreciate them. Little gift cards. You don't have to have a lot of money in your budget to appreciate them. If you're in a little church where you have no budget, you get some of those faithful ladies who love to bake and say, could you bake some cookies? I want to deliver little bags of cookies to my teachers. Put a little note on there that says, thank you so much for serving. We appreciate you. I like to probably every 3 months appreciate my volunteers. And if they're taking a break for the summer, for Christmas, stuff like that, let them know you appreciate them. Again, you're not buying them. You're not just trying to, build up their self-esteem. You're really just saying, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you that you care about these kids. I want to show you tangibly. So appreciate them. Take a minute in church. Say their name, or do a quick little video of them at work or something where you catch them and appreciate them. Let them know. And not just blanket appreciation, but be able to look them in the eye and say, Julie, you have been amazing at leading worship with these kids. Thank you so much for allowing God to work in your heart so that you can touch the hearts of these kids. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Okay, so I would love for you at some point to talk more about how you can appreciate your volunteers. One little thing I want to say too is know their love language. This seems silly, I know, but if you know their love language and you know that Julie is a words of affirmation, I just made her year. If you know that Bernie loves gifts and I give him a gift and say thank you, I've got him forever. Okay? If I know that Harriet loves hugs and I make sure to hug her every week, okay, so you see what I mean? Make it intentional and make it individual. It'll be really big. Okay, ultimately, people want to be a part of something they're excited about and believe will make a difference. There's nothing better than kids ministry for that. You and I are on this awesome break that I believe God has led us to in children's ministry. 414 window, largest age group, largest unreached people group in the world. Ages 4 to 4. Part of changing that. Changing the DNA of our world, changing the DNA of our towns, of our schools, of our churches, because we work with kids. If you recruit people to a vision and you bring them back to that vision time and time again, you will keep your volunteers. They will not leave. And if they do, they're leaving to go somewhere better, or because God's doing something in their heart then you let them go. And that's another thing with keeping these volunteers. When it's time for them to be done, or they feel God's calling them somewhere else, you send them off with a party, with a pat on the back, and you thank them for their service. Because if they're pursuing something else God's called them to, it is all about the church and it's all about Jesus, and we care more about their personal life and what God's doing in their life than we care about the whole that's going to be left behind. Because again, if it's God's ministry, it's way too important to be desperate about it. Okay? So, I know I feel like I got fast at the end there. So much great stuff to talk about. I do encourage you to check out my blog. Tweet me. I do travel all over. I try to keep my calendar updated, and I would love to meet with you. I'd love to have coffee with you if you want me to come in and do a training, do an evaluation, whatever I can do for you. That's my heart. That's my passion. That's what God's called me to do. It's what jazzes me up. So hit me up, let me know, melissajmacdonald.com, and I would love to meet you, see you, and I just want to thank you for what you're doing in kids ministry, and thank you for the lives that you're touching, and be willing to step outside of what you've always thought and let God use you in a new, different way. It's going to blow your ministry out of the water. I believe it, and it's going to blow you out of the water, because when we're healthy and we're pouring into people who are healthy, God can do some amazing things. So bless you. I look forward to seeing you at another time, maybe on a seminar or in person, and we'll catch up with you later. But thank you.